Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on how to get more mileage from CRM with add-on solutions. Today, we're going to cover the key elements of solutions for Microsoft Dynamics CRM Online. We're going to learn about the ins and outs, advantages, disadvantages, and how you can use solutions to make your business better and more efficient. We're going to learn how you can use solutions to extend the capabilities of Dynamics CRM, how you can bundle your custom fields, forms, etc. So all that can be locked up and managed. You're going to learn how to do all your testing in a sandbox account so you don't affect live data. Then when your solution's finished, you can import it into your production environment. And then you're also going to learn how to handle just your unique business processes. Yep, and all that amounts to, basically using solutions to author, package, and maintain units of software that extend Microsoft Dynamics CRM Online, as well as the on-premises version as well. I am Brian Dunn, Director of Marketing at Quanta CRM. With me is Miriam Florio, Senior Consultant. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend. I'm just going to take a minute to cover some of the call logistics before we start our presentation. Right now, everyone is in listen-only mode, so if you have questions, just type them into the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll answer those at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar is going to be recorded, so if you missed some details and need to view it again, or if you know someone you think might benefit from the information that we provide today and they're not here, then you can just visit us on our events page at quantacrm.com tomorrow and find the recorded presentation there. That's quantacrm.com/events. And while you're on the events page, you will see our upcoming webinars as well as recordings of past events. So if you find this one valuable or have interest in other topics concerning Dynamics CRM, you can sign up for our other webinars there. Today we should clock in right around half an hour. So without further delay, we will get started.
Thanks, Brian. We're going to be taking a look at solutions directly in Dynamics CRM Online. I'm going to pull up my system. And let's just start off with talking about what a solution is. And a solution is really a package of changes, modifications, deployment, customizations that you might make to your system that you can put inside of a single package or multiple packages to introduce into a new system. So as Brian was saying, you may have a sandbox and a production environment. What you might decide is that you're going to produce all of your changes in the sandbox environment and then deploy them to the production environment. In this case, you would create a solution inside of the sandbox, then export that solution out of the sandbox and import it into the production environment. Those might be changes to certain forms on different entities. For example, you might go into your account entity and add multiple fields, change a form around, export that solution, and then import that into your production environment. The solutions can be really helpful for those who want to make changes, but not necessarily make changes while users are live in the system. By default, there are several kinds of solutions. So the one kind of solution that comes with every system is the default solution. And you'll see this when you go into the back end of the system. So if I go under Settings and then Customizations, you'll see that there is a default solution under Customize the System. And you've probably seen this when you log in. Once you're in the back end of the system and you see this default solution, default solution show up here, it just means that all changes in the system are being captured in this default solution. So anything that you make a modification to, whether that's a component, an entity, a template, and we'll go over what's included and what isn't later, will be captured inside of the solution. So it's essentially being recorded. And you're creating a file, or multiple files, that can then be imported into a new system. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Another way that solutions are used are for third-party data. And so if you ever want to, let's say, import a third-party solution for a different piece of software or some other functionality that you don't currently have in your Dynamics CRM Online solution, you can always download a different solution and then import that into the back end of your system, thus adding that solution or introducing that information into your system at that time. And so solutions are used to import new or different functionality within Dynamics CRM Online. So inside of your sandbox environment, you're going to set up solutions, or you might set up solutions and you might ask, well, why would I do this, or when would I do this? And so why you might do that is in order to contain or control the changes that are being made inside of your production environment. It's never really a great idea or a best practice to make changes directly in a live environment where users are in the system if you can avoid it. You can get a sandbox at a nominal price, and once you get the sandbox, you can then start making changes inside of your sandbox that are essentially mirrored from your production system. That is to say, if you set up a sandbox, you can actually have that sandbox look like a copy of your production system. And so we can say, take the production system at this time and make our sandbox mirror it. And so what it'll do is make a copy, and then you have this playground or place where you can make changes, and it's essentially a safe environment for you to make those changes. When you make those changes in that environment and then you're satisfied with those changes inside of a solution that you started, you can then export that solution and bring it into your live or production environment safely and effectively. There are two kinds of solutions within Dynamics CRM that you can create. One type is a managed solution, and another type is an unmanaged solution. And there's a lot of confusion that can come of what a managed solution and what isn't a managed solution, when to use the other one. So a couple thoughts on this. Managed solutions are read-only. So let's say I'm making changes to the account entity inside of my sandbox, and I add the account entity to my solution. If I take that solution to my production environment, then that's considered a managed solution, and the production environment knows that the users cannot make changes to this. And so this is a really good example of what to do if you have, let's say, a dedicated IT team or dedicated users that are only authorized to make changes inside the sandbox and then deploy them to production. You don't have other, for lack of a better term, cooks in the kitchen in your production environment making changes again to that account entity. And so we want to make all the changes in the sandbox and then deploy them to production. And that could be in different iterations. We can say version 1, version 2, phase 1, phase 2, etc. And so those are considered read-only and unmodifiable changes. So that's the managed solution. Unmanaged solutions are editable. And so if I want to make changes in my sandbox, let's say I add a few fields to the account entity or the opportunity entity, and I package those up inside of my solution as an unmanaged solution, and I import those into my sandbox, then users could make changes to those. Let's say they want to move some fields around on a form, they want to add additional information right in the production environment and not in a sandbox, they can. And so that's kind of a more open solution. And so for some organizations, that's a better option. And so you just want to keep that in mind as soon as you start a solution off, to decide on what kind of solution is best for you. Remember that unmanaged solutions can be exported as managed. And so you might make an unmanaged solution at first in your sandbox, and then decide I'm going to export it as a managed solution, and then take that out of the system like that, or you can always export it as also unmanaged. And so there are different types there. So let's quickly go over what's covered in a solution, or what can be added to solutions and what can't be, and then we'll create a solution and we'll add an entity to it and export that solution. So what can be added to solutions? So a lot of information can be added to solutions. It's really a way that the system tracks our changes, modifications to the system, and bundles them inside of a package. It's really important to remember that these bundles are references. They're not the actual content. And so what I mean by that is, when we make changes in the system, let's say we're making changes to the account entity. I'll go to the account. So we're making changes, let's say, to a form, or we're making changes to a particular list view. Those changes are being tracked in our solution. Well, they're always being tracked in our default solution. So we looked at that at the very beginning, and that's just basically the system, if you want to think of it that way. And so those changes are always there in the system. They're also being packaged in any solution that's referencing that. So if I make a solution that says Miriam Solution 2016, and I put the account into that solution, the account entity, then any changes I make that fall under what I've added to that solution are going to be referenced. And so when I bundle that solution up, they'll be exported. They can also be maintained or shown in other solutions. So I might have a colleague that's another IT professional that's also making changes in the system to the account, let's say, and they've included that. that can also include my changes. And so it's not mutually exclusive. I can have certain entities inside of a solution that belong to another solution as well. And so really you can put pointers or references into multiple solutions to a single reference. So what can be added? Well, we can add application ribbons, article templates, business rules, charts, connection rules, contract templates, dashboards, email templates, any of the entities that are native or out of the box to the system, fields, field security, forms, again, mail merge templates, messages, changes to option sets, reports, processes, security roles, service endpoints, sitemaps, and web resources. What can't be added to solutions? Well, solutions can't contain business units, teams, queues, goals, subjects, or product catalogs. So if you set these up inside of your sandbox, or you're spending a lot of time setting these up into your sandbox, you might want to think twice and keep it minimized on your sandbox environment. So you don't want to do a whole lot of setup with these items on there. If you do, you can always import them into your production. You can manually import those in there, or they can be manually created. And so you just want to be careful or be mindful of those things that you cannot add to solutions. So let's just take a look right now. We're going to create a solution and walk through that. So under settings, customization, and solutions, you can see a list of existing solutions that are here. I can add a new solution. So we're going to give that a name. So we'll just call this the account entity fall 2016, whatever you want to call it. I'll just tab through, let the name take the default name. And solutions have publishers. I will choose the Quanta CRM publisher, version number 1.0. Now solutions, as I mentioned earlier, can have iterations or different deployments, and so you can have different version numbers of those solutions. Let's say you have a set of changes that you've made to the account entity. That's version 1.0. You import that into your sandbox environment, and you realize, oh, we may have forgotten something. There was something important we should have added to this particular solution. Let's go back into the sandbox, add that to a new solution, and we'll call that version 1.2. And so you change the iteration or version number and then import that over the top. And if we scroll down, we'll see the package type says it's unmanaged. Of course, it's not managed right now. We can manage it at the time of export. So we'll click Save and Close. And if we come back here, here's our new solution, account entity, fall 2016. Oh, we have a typo there. That's okay. Don't mind that. And so we can add items to this particular solution. So let's go into the solution. As you're making changes to the system and you create a solution, it's always a good practice to go directly into that solution. What I mean is that normally when you might make changes, you go under settings and then customizations and create that change that you wanted to make right in the customizations portion. What that's going to effectively do is make those changes inside of the default solution and not your solution. And so you'd have to add that later or remember to add that later. Best practices, if you can remember, go under solutions and choose the solution under which you want to make your changes. And then what you'll do is you'll make those changes inside of here. And it looks a lot like when you go under the customization.
Hello, Miriam, are you still there?
Hello?
There you are. You're back.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, lost audio for a second there. Okay, so what you want to do is make the changes underneath that solution itself. And so this looks a lot like your regular customization portion, but it's essentially empty. And so it's not including any information until you either explicitly add it to here, or you add it implicitly using add required components. And the required components are essentially required items for whatever you've added. Let's say I add a report to my component. That report would then depend on certain fields to be available or certain entities, and then those will become required components. And so you would always add required components if you need them or if you know that they don't exist inside of your current solution. So if I go under entities, let's say I want to create a new solution and I want to add in my account information to it. So I'm going to go under entities and choose to add existing. I can always create a new entity here if I wanted to, or I can add existing. And so at this point, I'm given the option to add different entities. And so I can add those from here. I can add activity, and whatever entities aren't already included. And so with the account entity, I can add more. The other thing you get to add are different views, charts, fields, keys, relationships, messages, etc. So while you're under here, you can add in more information. So I can add in certain views. If you think you want to add in all, you can always do a select all, or just add in specific portions. And you can do the same thing under charts, fields, keys, etc., and dashboard. So we can just add a number of these. And I am under activity and add accounts, by the way. This was renamed, so this is a little bit different than what we anticipated, but that's okay. Hopefully you get the idea. So we're creating a activity solution here. So I'm going to click Finished. If I want to click Add All Assets, what that essentially means is just add everything that's related to this entity to my solution, or I can deselect it and add explicitly what I need. And sometimes this can take a second here. Okay, and so now we've added this particular entity to our solution, and you can see here there are other items that I can add. So if I wanted to go under reports, for example, I could come here and add an existing report. I could go under email templates or mail memory templates and add those here. Now that I've added a particular entity to my solution, what I can do is if I want to make changes to the entity, let's say I want to add a field, I can add the field directly from my solution. Now this doesn't mean that the field is only added to this particular solution. Remember, our solution contains pointers or references, and so it's essentially creating it in the main system. It's just referencing it from here, and so it's included in this package or bundle. And so you can add additional items here. So once you've set up your solution with everything that you need, or at least for now, then you want to save your solution. You also want to publish your solution or add subcomponents. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so now that we've published our solution, let's just close it out. You can actually take your solutions and you can actually export them out of the system. So once you select your solution, or we'll say that, again, this was actually the activity, but it's an account, that's all right. I'm going to select this and I can choose to export this out of the system. And so it says only published customizations are exported, publish your customizations. So we want to publish all. And sometimes that can take a little bit of time, so hang tight. Now what happens is we're going to go to the next step, and we can choose the type of solution. This file actually gets created on your local machine, and so you could edit this file if you knew what you were doing inside of the zip folder that is created. You also have system settings that you can export at this time. So you could export auto numbering settings. Let's say you have auto numbering set on cases or some other entity. You can always export that so it matches. Calendars, email tracking, general marketing, Outlook synchronization roles, relationship roles. ISD configuration, sales information. And so you could choose some of these additional settings. I will say that most people don't export these settings when they're exporting solutions. They can potentially overwrite your other settings in your main system, so you want to be mindful of this. And so at this point, we're going to choose the package type. Is this an unmanaged solution? Meaning, is it editable in the solution that we're bringing it into, or the system that we're bringing it into? Or is it read-only, is that managed? And so you want to choose which one of these options best fits your needs. Target solution CRM version, so just asking the CRM version. Most of you will be on the same version as your sandbox. Sometimes that's not the case. You want to make sure you're using the right one. And then, of course, you can export it, which will then create a file on your local machine that you can then use to import into your production system or another system at that. So, Brian, I think we're ready for any questions that we may have.
Okay, we did have a couple that have come in so far. Get down to those. There they are. The first question is, what do you do if you want to make changes in your sandbox and in the production environment? Should you use solutions?
If you want to make changes in both the production and your sandbox environment, if you have both types of systems set up, then you probably want to use unmanaged solutions, which are editable. So you want to make changes in your production after you import the unmanaged solution into that environment, and also make them in your sandbox. I would just warn you to be really careful when you're making these kind of changes, because it just keeps it's a little more disorganized. And so if it's possible, I would always recommend making changes only in a sandbox environment and making a habit of that, aside from the items that can't be packaged in a solution like business units or products or teams. Those can always be done directly in the production environment. But other than that, I think it's best practice to try and keep everything in one solution or multiple solutions in your sandbox.
Okay, are there hazards to deleting solutions?
Yes, there are hazards to deleting solutions. So mainly managed solutions. So if in your production environment you delete a managed solution, and remember, delete's that kind of one of those scary words, right? It's not remove, it's delete. It can actually delete data. And so if you have a managed solution, you have custom fields inside of that managed solution, and then you delete that managed solution, that data inside of those fields will be lost. You will have backups that you could go to for a few days, but that's essentially it. And so you want to be really, really mindful of what you're doing. If you delete an unmanaged solution, it's much less scary. It's actually just going to delete the solution itself. The information should stick around, and so you won't necessarily lose that, because remember, those unmanaged are more editable, a little bit looser and freer. And so a lot of people don't delete unmanaged solutions, and also we never really recommend deleting managed ones unless you're okay with losing some of that data. You can then, of course, import your new version of your managed solution, which would then add that fresh back in. But if you had anything associated with it, let's say if you had it in place for a while, then that could be dangerous. So I would check with your success coach and make sure you're doing the right thing.
Okay. Next question. I started a solution and forgot to add my opportunity main form to it. Do I have to start all over again with a new solution?
Well, you have a couple options. What you could do is either modify that original solution. You can go back into it and add another component to it, or you could create a new solution, add that item to it, and call it version 2, or give it some kind of a meaningful name and import that after the fact.
Okay, what happens if I make a solution and import it into my new system and forget to add my charts to it?
Same idea. So if you forget to add something to your solution, you can either create a new solution and add that whatever you need to that new solution, including any required components, or you can take the original solution and modify it, re-export it, and then re-import it.
And the last question for now, at least, how do I know to whom the solution belongs? Is there a way to tell?
Okay, that's a really good question. So what we didn't go over in detail is when we just looked at solutions and setting one up is you might have noticed there was a field that said publisher on it. And in your system, you can set up multiple publishers. And those publishers are essentially the people who own the solutions or are making them. And so if we have multiple people who are making modifications inside of our sandbox, we want to set up multiple publishers and say these changes belong to Miriam, these changes might belong to Ronnie, whoever those folks are that are making the changes, and that way we can see from where they came. And so you can use those publishers to identify what belongs to whom.
Okay, it looks like the end of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I know your time is valuable, so I hope you found the information we presented valuable too. If you have any questions that come up after we end the presentation, please reach out to us at 844-244-6310. We would love to hear from you. Again, today's presentation was recorded and will be posted to quantacrm.com/events tomorrow. So if you missed the details or we know someone you think might benefit from the presentation, you can find the recorded webinar there. And we do have a special offer, an additional bonus for attending today's webinar. If you request this within the next 30 days, we will help you create a trial instance of Dynamics CRM Online at no charge. So that's like your sandbox. So just mention this webinar special and use the promo code of Solutions Secrets. It's on your screen there. So contact us before November 19th. Mention Solution Secrets. We'll help you get that sandbox set up. Again, thanks for attending, everyone, and have a great day.